Hello everyone, my name's David, and I'm the president and co-founder of Soyuz microphones. I'm going to give a little spiel, and then afterwards I'm going to turn it over to Butch, and then we'll take some questions together. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is a little bit about the history of the company. I'm a singer by trade, and I'm oddly popular in Russia, so I've spent, which is a hot topic these days. I've spent a lot of time traveling over there, and about 5 years ago I had this crazy idea that when you go to great studios, usually the best microphones that you find are old German and Austrian tube mics like the U87, the U47, the U67, and I thought, Russia has this amazing tradition of machining, of vacuum tubes, of all this stuff, but they don't have very good design, they don't have very good quality control, and there's not even a word for marketing in Russian. They just say marketing, So I thought maybe if some Westerner like myself could design some beautiful microphones and find some of these hidden talents, these great scientists and machinists, perhaps it might be possible to create a great microphone that's kind of like a modern classic, that's without being a copy of any of these microphones, without being a clone. So this is the SU017. It's still our flagship microphone. And it's the first one we developed. It's a large diaphragm tube condenser mic. We made our first prototype about 5 years ago, and I tried it and I thought, wow, it just sounds amazing. But maybe I'm biased. So we sent one to Al Schmidt, we sent one to Nigel Godrich, and to some great Russian producers, and they said, wow, David, it sounds amazing. It's a great sounding microphone. I called my partner and said, maybe we're on to something, We couldn't get money anywhere. People would say, wow, that's a great idea. That sounds amazing. Could we get some money? No, sorry. It's too big, too small, whatever. But we scraped our funds together, and we had enough to have our own little workshop, and we outsourced a lot of stuff at first. And slowly, our reputation began to grow. Certain people who were respected in the industry started to use our microphones. For the first 3 years, every penny we made, we put into production. So we would buy lathes, we would buy drill presses, and our goal was to move everything in-house, the way that they used to do it in like the golden age of microphone manufacturing. And the capsule, I want to talk a little bit about the capsule, because the capsule is the most difficult thing to do really well in any microphone. And no one believed that we made our capsules, because it's super, super hard, You need to have such extreme accuracy on the lathe when you cut the back plate for it to be a great capsule. That I'll tell you what we had to do. Our lathes come from the Kalashnikov factory. They make guns and lathes, and they make really, really good lathes. But even their lathes are only guaranteed to plus or minus 2 microns. So 4 microns they can guarantee, but you need 2 for a really good capsule. So they would make a lathe, they'd call us up, and we'd fly our machinist there. He'd test it. No, sorry, it's not good enough. 3 times we had to fly him, and then we found the perfect lathe to do it. And we only use it for this capsule cutting process. Sometimes people write to me and say, hey, I have a YouTube channel, and send me a mic and I'll promote it, And I say, man, it takes 2 weeks to make an SU017, There are companies that manufacture overseas, and they, can order thousands, and it doesn't cost much. But our mics, I go once a month to Russia. I live in Barcelona now, but I go once a month to meet with our guys at the factory, and I tell them, listen, we sell expensive microphones, so when somebody buys it, it should be better than they expect. And too often in the modern world, the opposite is true. You save up, you buy something, and you're like, oh, feels kind of worse than I thought. You know, that metal's kind of thin. That switch is kind of rattly. You know, I tell him everything about it should be better. You know, the box, the wooden box it comes in, the weight of it, and the build quality, the sound quality, most of all. You know, and I said, picture in your mind who the customer is. You know, some young guy maybe who has his own studio that he just started, and he has to like work extra hours at work, and you know, not take his girlfriend out for a few weekends in a row, and he finally gets enough money to buy a Soyuz. And when he gets it, it should really blow his mind, you know? So that's what we strive for. Butch will talk a little bit about this mic later. This was the first one that he got. And then the SU-011, which is the small diaphragm tube mic. Those are our flagship large and small diaphragm mics. I want to talk for a second, and tell me when I'm getting like around 5 minutes, because I'll just keep talking. This is the bomblet. I wanted to develop a large diaphragm mic that was a little bit more affordable. You know, it would still be expensive, but more like in the $1,200 range. But I didn't want to outsource anything. So I said to my partner, how can we do it? You know, what can we do that can save us a little bit of money in the manufacturing without sacrificing quality? So we decided to machine it out of aluminum instead of brass, because you don't need to coat it, you don't need to paint it. We decided to use a Lomo Capsule, which is, as far as I know, this is the only mic in production today that uses this capsule. Lomo was a Russian company. They don't make mics anymore, but in the early 70s, they took a AKG CK12 capsule. They redesigned it with 3 back plates for more consistency, because it's all through holes. And they used it in one of their tube mics. We used that capsule design in this. It's a little bit easier to assemble. We use a circuit board instead of point-to-point, and then we just include a simple ring instead of the shock mounts, because we make these shock mounts in-house. And doing all those things, we could bring the price down to $1,200 without sacrificing any real quality stuff. So it's made in the same factory, the same machines by the same machinist as the 017. This mic, the SU-013, is the FET version of the SU-011, and I wanted it to be special. So, you know, I listen to people when I travel around at different studios, and they always would say, oh, the Neumann CAM-84, man, that was the best mic ever made, and the 184, wow, what a piece of crap, you know. And the difference was the internal transformer. So I said to our engineers, can you design me a transformer that will fit inside? And they spent a year coming up with it. So we put they gave me the prototype. I took it to the studio. I listened to it. I thought, it's okay. It's not amazing though, you know. And I went back and said, give me some options, you know. They gave me 5 different capsule tensions, a couple different versions of the transformer. And we went back in the studio and tested it on all the different sources and listened. And that's the other thing about Soyuz microphones that's different from a lot of companies nowadays, is that's the final test of everything. We listen to it. How does it sound? How does it sound on strings? How does it sound on acoustic guitar, on drums, whatever you'd use it for? And then we choose the combination that's the best, the schematic with the capsule, with the transformer. Let's see. Well, I'm getting to the point where I'm going to invite Butch up, I think, and you know, I'll sit with you up here, Butch. We can talk a little bit, and then we'll take some questions.
I have a friend of mine who is a musician. His name is Beck, and you may have heard of him. He was telling me about these microphones that his friend Dave was making, and I've always been a big fan of Beck's records and his work in the studio. I just think he's you know, he's a genius, and he's very much a stickler for sound and for production, clearly, to the point where he will spend 5 years making a record, which I don't know how anybody has the patience and tenacity to do that. I would shoot myself in the face. But the end result is always incredible, and some of his records that he's put out have been my favorite sounding records of all time. Oh yeah, 2 mics.
Have my own.
We are now Run DMC. We don't have to pass the mic. He was. I remember I was sitting over at his house and listening to what was going to be coming out, the Morning Phase record, and he was playing me the Morning Phase record, and I was just like, "This sounds so good." So it reminds me a lot of Sea Change, which was another one of my favorite Sonic records of all time, and I still listen to it. It's a benchmark, and Nigel Godrich, who worked on that, is who you mentioned earlier, who's I think one of my favorite, let's call it engineering producers and for sound.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, and so, Beck had told me that I needed to check out these new microphones that his friend was making, and they were making them in Russia, and they were all handmade and hand milled. And the thing is in the studio, I tend to be a little bit, and this might be a letdown to some of you people that are into the production and engineering side, but I have zero patience. I know gear, but I don't care as much. I'm not like going to sit there and do a microphone cable shootout for like 7 hours and go, this one's better. Like, I don't have time for that because I would rather focus on the song. But if you have a piece of gear that's inspiring sonically, it can make the song better. And so I realize it's a double-edged sword there. And so basically, or a double-sided capsule.
It could be that.
And so Dave brought over these microphones, and he brought over the 017, which is this one here. And first thing I noticed was obviously the build quality was through the roof. It was incredible. Like if you pick this mic up right now and you've held other mics, like if you've held like an old 251 or an old, even an old 87, like a Neumann 87 or a Telefunken U47, the bodies are they're just made very solid, like a piece, it's a solid piece of machinery, and build is important. And this mic is so solid and has weight to it, and it's beautiful, and I was like, okay, great, it passes the aesthetic test first. It's beautiful. I don't even care what it could look like a fucking shoe, and I wouldn't care as long as it sounds good. But it looked and handled and fit in your hand. It was just beautiful. Put it in the stand. We fired it up. I think
Let me take over at this point, so that you don't have to brag. He had a session up, and he put the mic up. I'm a singer too, so I hate guys like him that just are like, yeah, let me just do a quick vocal, and it's like a finished you know what I mean? Just a perfect, I was like, wow, that was shocking. Okay. He's like, let me try it in guitar. Then he pushes it down and plays this just ridiculous, beautiful guitar part, and then he's like, do you take PayPal?
Totally, and that was it. So I literally did. That's to me the test is like, if I don't have to mess with it to make it sound great, I want it to sound great immediately, just because I don't have the patience. And a lot of times that's the key for something being great, is when you plug it in and it sounds great immediately, and a lot of times it can inspire the performance and make you sing better. And as a producer, I think that's one of the things I find whenever I'm working with other singers. It doesn't matter so much about me collecting gear and having this studio full of stuff. A lot of people that come in to sing on the records and come in as if I'm producing another artist, they don't care what I've got in there. A lot of times they're used to going in, there's a kid with a laptop and one microphone, and that's it. And that's how and you know what? That's great, because you can make an entire record off of that, and make a great record. But what's important is the feedback you get, not this kind of feedback, but like the feedback you get from an artist immediately when they sing into it,
yeah,
or play something into it, and they hear it in the headphones, and they go, what am I singing through? And that's happened every time. And I'm not paid to be here, so I'm not like
true.
I'm not
couldn't
just,
afford it.
I'm not just saying that because you're here, but like that's been the beauty of like having that microphone up at my studio, is I can put it on any source, but mainly when I put it on a source that has an opinion, it's nice that unanimously they go, what am I singing through? And I tell them, and they're like, wow, this sounds incredible. Because a lot of times it's not people that are technical, and that's fine. I'd rather than just be good at doing what they do and not worry so much about, what's the chart specs, what's the ratio of blah blah blah. They're not gonna care about that. They just care about knowing it makes them feel good when they are playing or singing and they hear the source back. They go, I sound really good, and I'm really happy. And that's what I've been finding has been great with it. And I'll move down to the 011, which is the guy down at the end. And that mic when you gave me that mic to try, I had to PayPal you again immediately because I put that mic on acoustic.
I love that part of our relationship.
I know. And the 017 here, the big guy, that was awesome on acoustic, but I've always been a fan of pencil condenser mics on. It's a great name for an album, Pencil Condenser, and it's basically that sound and that direction pointed at a source has always sounded good. And I used to use KM84s and SM81s and things like that were great mics on stringed instruments. And I can honestly say that, and I told you this when I got here, I was like, there's not been an acoustic guitar or a stringed instrument or a horn source or anything that hasn't been that microphone. Ever since I got it,
to hear.
And it's great. It is great to hear. It sounds amazing, and it's just been super consistent and reliable for something. And that's the other thing too, is when you get into using tube things, and I mean you just never know how long that's going to last and if it's going to be temperamental. And a lot of times with old mics, which is you get the cool factor. Obviously, I know from like having this vintage mic collection, but what you don't see is the unglamorous side of when the cameras are off and there's no band in the studio working with you, and there's a service tech taking every one of your mics out the door and spending hundreds of dollars a month getting them serviced because they're making noise. And that's the biggest problem, is like you can put one of those mics up and it's beautiful and it's got a pedigree. Tom Petty sang on this particular microphone in 1974. But like, the thing is if it's sitting there making fucking noise and hissing and popping and shit whenever someone's singing into it, we can't use it. So I slowly went from having all like only vintage mics and a lot of headaches to just kind of weeding them out, and I would sell them off. And that's the one thing about these microphones is you get all the character, you get a lot of the vintage character of them, but they're reliable, and that's the most important thing to me, because I'm just going in the studio and don't necessarily want to stop and go, all right, let's diagnose where this like snap crackle pop's coming from. And luckily, I mean, knock on wood, they've been workhorses and solid.
Yeah, we try. That's one of the things we try to emphasize is that they're built in the way that vintage mics were built. Everything's done in house. Capsules, transformers, all the metal work, all the paint, power supplies, everything. But they're brand new, so they're not going to crap out on you, in the middle of a session. And we're a Russian company, but we have our office in Los Angeles as well. So we try to be really, really good. If there ever is, it's very rare, but if there's ever an issue, we take care of it immediately.
And that was I'll be honest and say that, like, I mean, obviously when you deal with handmade things, sometimes there's going to be a little idiosyncrasy with a brand new unit. And I bought two matched pairs of the 01s, the 011s. And I think I remember I bought all the capsules, because there's a removable capsule on that. I don't know if you knew that already, but it's there's 3 different capsules you can just screw on and put on to have a different polar pattern. And so one is a hypercardioid, the other one is just a normal cardioid, which means it will pick up the source. And I'm so not technical, I'll probably even get this wrong, but it picks up the source directly pointed in front of the mic. And then there's an Omni Capsule, which means it picks up all around the mic. So when you're singing or playing an instrument, you can actually use it from a distance, and it would spread and pick up everything around it. And one of the capsules was faulty, which is a rarity, and I wouldn't be saying this right now if I didn't believe.
I wish you wouldn't. No.
I know, but I'm only saying it because literally, like that day, you guys came over, got the capsule, replaced it immediately. I've had no problems ever since, and that's just part of the things where if you buy from a bigger company or you get a mic from a bigger company, you're probably going to be having to send it off, and you might not see it for months, and that sucks. So it's been great to see the craftsmanship firsthand with these, and I've been using them on everything that I've been in the studio recording. And I told Dave that the 017 mic here in the front is that's kind of like my go-to mic. I have it on a big Starbird stand. That's one of those big heavy-duty mic stands, and it stays up high so that it picks up everything in my room, because I've got a studio that's very small but functional, and everything's all in one room. So if I need to capture a quick recording of everybody playing something live to get an idea, that mic is the one doing it. And a lot of times it'll end up going on the tracks. and it'll be the room mic for the drums. I can put it up close and get a one mic drum sound on it, and then I can like set it up straight, and then it's the vocal mic. It's just very versatile.
Again, I'm kind of like Butch. I'm not the super technical guy. I design the mics and come up with like, well, it'd be cool to have this kind of mic. But generally, I would say, with a tube mic, you might want to go with a solid state mic pre, so it doesn't get too much tube. I mean, you can use it with a tube pre as well.
I'm using my console.
Yeah.
I have a Quad 8. Yeah, an old 2082 Quad 8, which is it's funny for geeking out. It's the console that's on the back of Countdown to Ecstasy by Steely Dan, which was a Village Recorder in 1972. That was the console that they installed in that room, and it became Steely Dan's room. And it's actually funny enough. That's the first studio I ever recorded in when I was young in Hollywood. And then my studio now is only about a mile away from there, and that console has been all up and down the coast, all over America, and it's back in my room now, and it's pretty cool. And I use the pre's in that console, and I run that. Usually I'll just run one of the pre's out of that. It's not a tube console or anything, so I'll run out of that into a compressor usually in line, depending on what I'm going for. But it's anything from distressors and retros and channelers and things like that. But honestly, it sounds pretty damn good on any mic pre that I have, and I have several others. Console is already just kind of like normal to everything in the room. It's a 20 input, so I'm using every one of those. But I've got some TG Chandler stuff that sounds really good for it. I mean, then I've got some 1073s that sounds amazing with an original 1073 Neve, and I just have a pair of those, and those pretty much can cover a lot of ground, just having two of those. A lot of times I just like to have something that's a good source to capture inspiration or ideas that are in the room. A lot of people just pull out their iPhone, and that's fine too. I've used iPhone recordings and they've been on records, just from doing this, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of times if I have it already, it's already in, it's already normal, I can just hit record on the computer, Pro Tools, and I'm able to just sit there and let people hash out something without. And to be fair, my whole room is wired up, so like all my drums are already mic'd up, everything, the piano's already mic'd up, so we can kind of like record live if we want to. But a lot of times I won't bother with that just because it's intimidating to a lot of people. I'll just kind of like press record and throw the screensaver on so that people don't see that I'm actually recording what's going on in the room. And yes, a lot of times the stuff that's captured never leaves the studio, but for the most part it's great, and it's just like being able to sit there and go, oh, let's go back and listen to the part that you came up with on the bass right there or whatever, and then like I said, I'll leave it, and I have a pretty strategic place that I like it that's out of the way of everybody in the room, but it's also a great place to for whenever I do engage all the drum mics. It's just a massive sound for the drums, and it becomes about 50% of the drum sound. And I'm not a big fan of, like, if we're talking about drums, I'm not a big fan of like 20 mics on the drums. I hate that. I mean, I probably use, and I mean, whatever, people could say like, oh, Zeppelin only used 3, but like every drummer is different, and not every drummer hits like Bonham either. So it's a different thing. So I probably have like maybe 6 mics, 7 mics at the most, but maybe like just like 6 mics or something. And this one, where I've got it placed, I've figured out the sweet spot in the room, which is just trial and error and finding that spot. But I diverted. I went technical, and you asked about the songwriting process, didn't you? And I'm sorry. But that just depends on the artist. That depends on if it's for me or if it's somebody else and I'm co-writing with them. In that instance, a lot of times we're coming up with that idea right there in the room, or they say, I've got this idea, let me play it for you. I need help finishing it. And that's when we'll start breaking it down. And to me, this is not a technical reply, but this is more just, to me, the truth is that the song is all about the lyrics and the melody and the message and how it hits people. I've said this a lot, and it makes a lot of more engineer types bummed out that I say, like, spending 6 hours dialing in a kick drum sounds it's not gonna change a kid's life when he hears the song later.
That's true.
At all. Especially if you give it to certain mixers that are going to end up replacing the fucking sound later. And it's like, wait, I worked all day on... No, it's like, I've learned I know what I like, and I can usually get it pretty quick. So I think most importantly, I like to make sure the song is focused, which means the arrangement. And that to me is just like taking a nod from some of my favorite producers from back in the day. Like Phil Spector. Not a fan of all of his work, but like that Brian Wilson and people like that. That it really mattered about the arrangement and the parts, the sum of the parts. It wasn't just about like, oh, we got to like close mic this, we got to far mic this, So I think that's probably where I would start with it, and then it ends with, hopefully the end result is a big amalgamation of music and melody with a sick ass beat, bro. That's one of the things that I was excited about, because I know what I like, and I know I like the chesty sound of a U-47, the top end of a 251, those characteristics, an 87 or a 67, the top end of those. Those are when we checked out the 017, it had to me, this is my layman's answer for that, is it's the best things about a 251 and a U-47 combined, is what I think. So you don't, and that was the cool thing, is you could keep cranking the top end and it never got harsh, which was cool, because records are so bright now, and if they're not bright, then people think it's broken. A&R guys usually, but like the thing with like, I don't want it to be harsh, and that's the great thing about a mic like that, is you can EQ it and it won't get worse, it gets better. And that was a testament to this microphone, and that's my favorite sound, is like that kind of, I grew up on U-47s whenever I could ever finally afford one and keep it out of the shop long enough from getting repaired. So
yeah, that's whenever we're developing mics and I'm listening, I absolutely hate harshness, so that's number one. I never want to put anything out in the world. The world is harsh enough without harsh mics, and so of course everyone likes a nice open top end, but it should be sweet.
Your slogan for the next campaign. The world is harsh enough. Yeah.
And Russian, I in my opinion, like kind of the Russian microphone tradition is a kind of cozier sound. Like it's not a harsh thing in general. Old Lomos are like that, so it's just sort of their natural inclination. Well, the bomblet, it's a completely different animal. It has a completely different capsule, and what I would say about the bomblet is that it's a great all-around mic, which is what it was designed to be, but it's also fantastic on sources like upright bass, kick drum. It has
it's a FET.
It's a FET.
So so maybe a FET 47 substitute.
Kind of, yeah, but I would say it's a better all-around mic than a FET 47.
FET 47 is great, but it's very limited on its sources.
Yeah.
I find anyway, and most guys I grew up respecting in the business that I learned my tricks
said, like
from.
kick drums and cellos or double basses, maybe. At the
Really good, but also great on vocals, and it has a girthiness and a thickness to it that it's hard to find in that price range generally. That it's got some meat to it, which in the mid range. Yeah.
You were talking about mixers. Do you actually mix your stuff?
I hate mixing.
And somebody does it for you.
Somebody does it for me. And by the way, I love listening to mixes. I love good mixes. I think I'm just a frustrated mixer. And like I told you earlier, I'm impatient. So after I've spent all this time making a record, it zaps a lot of the creativity out of it and the fun out of it whenever I have to sit and focus on dialing in EQ points for a snare sound all day and all of a sudden. And there's guys that are just way better at it because they're super technical people and they will put the time and care into it. And I'm just impatient when it comes to that, I'm just gonna like burn off a rough mix and send it to people and just set it to stun. So it's like just so they go like, wow, that's exciting. But I'm also, to be fair, I tell them, I'm like, this is a rough. I put an A&R plug-in on it, and then I'm gonna like send it to you, and it's gonna be loud and it's gonna be exciting. But let's get somebody to mix it and really pinpoint the frequencies, make the bottom end right, because that's such a big part of like, especially when you do rock and roll records. and pop records, the bottom end is tricky. You can't just like every track can't have bottom end on it, and sometimes it can muddy up, and compression, all these things that they get into, where they get into all the parallel compression and all that. I kind of fall asleep whenever they're talking about it, but at the same time, I get it, and I know what they're doing. I just don't choose to, and I think it's also just I'm trying to hang on to what little bit of this shit I got left in these ears, and I think if I were mixing all the time, I would abuse the privilege.
Do you get involved with the process? Like, do they send you the mixes
Absolutely.
or the mastering, or?
Yeah, no, I do. I definitely care. Don't take don't get me wrong. Like, I definitely am like, you know, okay, I get back the first pass, and although I'm not super anal, I'm not going to get it back and be like, you know, I'm definitely going to be. I work with guys and girls that I love their work, and so I've been lucky enough to be in the business long enough to work with people that can't beat my roughs, and I usually don't work with them anymore. And then if it's people that are just smoking my rough mixes on the first pass back, I'll probably work with them again. And it's different from artist to artist and genre to genre too. I've got people that I like to use for certain styles of music, because not everybody's the right kind of mixer for everything. You know, what's a good pop mixer is not always a good rock mixer. And I also find it's a little bit like Christmas. You know, I get back this thing and I blast it through my car speakers, and I'm like, oh, it sounds exactly what I wanted it to sound like. You know, but like it does elevate it if it's done by the right person, and they use the right techniques on it.
Does that apply to mastering as well? You also involved in that, or that you leave to the label? And
I'm less picky about mastering. I go to tried and true places that I like, that don't fuck it up, and that's the big thing, because I've had it come back way too, you know, just way too overdone and cowboyed up, and then I have to tell them to ease it back, or they don't do it enough. So I just tend to go to people that I know are great. The thing I do care about, and this might be old-fashioned and dated in the world of you know, streaming and the singles world that we live in, and not a full album, but I'm a hopeless romantic that people are still going to listen to an album from front to back without yelling squirrel halfway through. But like, to me, like it's very important, the sequence and the flow of a record, and that's where mastering, I'm almost more concerned with that. The EQ and the compression to the overall mastering, I leave it to the guys that know what they're doing, because they'll get my tracks and they'll be like, oh, you got way too much this, or way not enough this in there, and I'll believe them because it's not my forte, and it's not something I really. But I care more about the flow of a record, which might make me seem completely outdated, but it matters a lot to me.
You tried 34 microphones, and our microphone was one of the best, and I love you. Well, that's great to hear. It really is. And you know, whenever I hear something like that, when I go back to Russia, I tell all of our employees about it, because it makes them feel really proud. We're located in a real working class town that has a lot of problems, and our microphone company is a real, like, shining light. You know, it's a good job. We pay about 40% above the normal wage for that town, and you know, they at first they were like, Jesus, you know, this American, he's always insisting on, you know, everything being perfect and this and that. And then they get it, you know, when I say, hey, you know, there was this girl and she said she tried 34 microphones at the NAMM show and really loved ours, you know, and they're like, oh, maybe he has a point, you know. Do I know of any records that, yeah, sure, the last Coldplay album was Soyuz, the last, you know, 3 years worth of Butch albums have been Soyuz. The Lumineers record, the Paramore record, Shawn Mendes record, there's a lot. The last Radiohead album used it. I mean, there's a ton out there, because there's a lot of big studios have started using them, and a lot of stuff out of Nashville as well.
I guess sadly I'm not a big, like, drums, yes, but like as far as like a single source, like a vocal or a guitar speaker or something like that, or a violinist or a sax player or whatever, I usually just use one microphone. I mean, you know, I can figure out how to fix phasing issues, but when you do that, I mean, obviously when I mic a kick, I mic a sub kick and an internal one, and you know, you deal with the phasing and you figure that out. But when it comes to using these, that's the other thing too. It's like a testament to a good microphone is not having to throw up another microphone.
Amen, brother. How many people work in our factory? There are about 20 full-time employees. We have 4 machinists. We have about 4 to 5 assemblers. We have, like I said before, we do everything in-house. And a lot of companies our size have fewer employees than us, but they outsource a lot of their metal work and they buy their capsules from different sources. But yeah, we have 20 on the production side. We have me, my partner, Kenny, sitting over here. He runs our LA office. So altogether, the company's about 25 people.
And those in Russia, are they cranking all the time? Or?
Oh yeah, they're full time. He asked, are those in Russia cranking all the time? They are cranking all the time. Except in May there are holidays, and you know they do take holidays. And my partner luckily is much better at I am than certain things like team building. And, you know, like he takes them bowling or to do paintball. They had big paintball battles, and you know. They have like barbecues by the river and stuff like that, you know, because it is a kind of a family business. Like we have a husband and wife that work there. Our main capsule expert, his daughter also works there. There's a couple of husband and wives, so it really feels like a big family. And we only hire people that we feel will get along with everyone, and that are good people, you know, because at the end of the day, that's going to affect the product that you're able to make. He asked, what's the personal favorite, Butch?
Well, I mean, I don't know that I have a favorite, because to me, like I record a lot of acoustic stuff, right? So to me, the best mic I have for that is the 011, the 011, and so I've used the 017 on that on acoustic guitar, and those kind of sources sounds incredible too. But it's just, I get a creature of habit, and it's like, I'm going to use that mic. It's always going to be out, and it's always going to be on a stand that's at, you know, waist level for playing acoustic guitar. And but I would say that I can't decide what would be my favorite one, because they're completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, would I use the 011 for vocals? No, probably not. But could it get a vocal? Sure, you know, and do it well. But I just like the fact that this one right here is a very much a Swiss Army knife, you know, as far as being able to put it on any source, and it sounds good. I mean, considering back in the day, the mics that it rivals, like the U47s and the 251s, that was on everything, every source. That was the mic, you know.
Technically, we also make an Omni Capsule as a special order, and we also make pads that screw in between there and there, so that it pads it between the capsule before it hits the electronics. And you may know Joe Barisi, the producer, and he loves recording extremely loud sources. And he borrowed the FET version of this, which is the 019. It's the same capsule, but it's a FET one. And he said, "Hey, can you guys give me a pad?" So we gave him a minus 10 dB pad. He said, "I think you could make me a minus 20. We're like, yeah, okay, man, we'll do it.
You put on guitars?
Then he says, minus 30?
Wow.
So we did that, guitar cabinets, bass cabinets, kick drums. And and he ended up buying a pair, you know. So yeah, to answer your question, we do make an Omni Capsule on special order, and we do make pads, but generally it's just used like that, you know, for the most part. Most of our mics, because the capsules are very well made, they can take a lot of SPL. The capsules can take a lot of SPL without collapsing, and the pads, you know, will bring down the volume before it hits the electronics. It'll lower the gain so that you don't get any kind of distortion from that.
They're pretty great. I have a pair, and they're pretty great on overheads as well. And depending on how hard your drummer hits, I put the pad in there in line with it, and then use them in a XY or whatever configuration you want. But they sound pretty amazing for that too, because that's like people are using KM84s for years.
Sure.
The pencil mic for overheads, and so having the pad is a very necessary thing, I think, for certain.
Absolutely, yeah. Any plans on making dynamic microphones, or like Telefunken reviving older microphones? Okay, it's funny. At the NAMM show, these gigantic men in suits walked over to our booth, with Chicago accents, and they were the guys from Shure. And they're like, "What do you got here?" And we're looking, I was like, "Well, we're Russian, And I said, I'll tell you, people ask me sometimes if we're going to make, dynamic mics, and I tell them, well, I'm a singer, and just about every gig I've ever played, there's an SM58. They're cheap as hell, they're durable, and they sound great. So I'm not sure where you can, enter that market, He goes, "You're a smart man." And as far as... we don't really copy other microphones. That's kind of our thing. We all want to make mics that they draw from a long tradition. Like Russia has a long tradition. We made rockets, they made rockets. We made tanks, they made tanks. We made mics, they made mics. So we're drawing from a long tradition, but we put our own spin on it. We borrow things from the West and from their tradition, and we try to come up with something unique, but that is made in the old way. He's asking, I'm supposed to repeat the question. How do you like recording acoustic guitars with the pencil?
So I'm pretty purist with it. I usually aim it at the heel of the neck, where the neck meets the body. So let's call that 12th fret area. Usually not directly at the sound hole, just because if you've tried that, it pushes too much air and it's very woofy. So I tend to like it about maybe, and depending on the mic, if you're using a very sensitive mic like the 017, I'll put that about maybe a foot and a half back sometimes. Actually, there's a song on my last record I did where it was the last song on the record, and it was literally just that microphone for my voice, for my vocal and the guitar, and it was about 6 feet away. And I thought it was, and again, I was doing it just to get the idea down, and I heard it back and I was like, I'm going to keep that. And that became the track on the record. Whereas the 011, I'll take that and put it maybe about 6 inches to a foot, depending on how hot I'm going to record the preamp, and sometimes, or how loud I'm going to strum, because that can create negative effect too if you're strumming really hard and it's too close. And so a lot of times I'll just kind of mess with that and see, and mess with the gain on the mic pre as well. But for the most part, I'm just pointing it right there at where the neck meets the body, and it tends to be a nice full sound. Some people might want to add. People that get a little bit more technical will add another microphone at the base of the body, and that can be a nice thing too. But I tend to see if it's going to work with one mic, it's going to be great. Just for phasing and things like that, it's just easier and it sounds great. So I think you'd have great results with that.
What are some of the go-to vocal mic placements for recording a vocal? That's a good question.
Yeah, well, a lot of times, I have a little vocal booth set up that I'll use, but like I said, there's no rules. My room is acoustically, it's about the same size as this room, and it's treated so it's not super reverberant or echoey. So I can set a singer up right in front of me, right behind me at the console, and turn around and talk to them, and still get a great vocal sound. And I usually, as a starting point, I'll have a pop screen, a pop filter, in front of it, so it doesn't get all the crazy pops from P's and T's and things like that when they sing. And I don't get, this is not good, usually, unless you're singing on a 58 or a 57 like this in the studio. But singing right up on one of these mics, they're very sensitive, and it's gonna give you negative results, I think, unless you're cutting a vocal like this, then it's kind of cool. So if you get up right on it, but a lot of times that's the singer's thing, is having mic control. And when they sing loud, they would back off the mic, and that was one of those techniques they used back in the day when they didn't have compression, a lot of compressors in line, like squashing and leveling. They had, they learned mic technique, and so when they sang quiet, they would be up close. But usually, I'd say about maybe 5 inches away is a good starting point. And if it's blowing the mic up too much, depending on how hard or soft the singer is, you back off a little bit. But one thing I can honestly say, and I stress this more than anything, is feeling comfortable while singing is the most important thing, and that's what I want to stress. Not having the most perfectly acoustic tuned room and vocal booth and isolation. I mean, some of the best records of all time. The singer was singing with bleed all around him from, and her from like the drums and the bass or whatever, or standing in front of the speakers, facing the speakers in the studio with them cranked and singing into like a 58.
Yeah.
And so there's no rules. It's just whatever sounds good and makes you comfortable.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all for coming out. I think that's about all the time we have, but it's been a lot of fun.